The morning shift at the Galactic Tourist Bureau began like any other, with Ambassador Kelthon shuffling his forearms as he sorted through paperwork at his curved metal desk. The office hummed with the quiet sounds of interstellar bureaucracy, computers beeping, translators buzzing, and the occasional frustrated sigh from overworked staff members. Kelthon had been working at the Bureau for 37 standard years. He had seen every possible travel disaster, from Zephyrian tourists who melted resort furniture with their natural heat, to aquatic merdi who flooded hotel rooms because they forgot to mention their breathing requirements. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for humans. His desk held neat stacks of travel warnings for different species. The crystalline people needed reminders about temperature control, a simple one-page document. The gas-based ethereals required pressure warnings, another single page. The plant-like rootkin needed soil recommendations, also one page. Then there was the human file. Kelthon picked up the thick folder with all four hands, struggling under its weight. The cover read Human Tourist Safety Guidelines, updated weekly. Inside were 47 pages of warnings, restrictions, and increasingly desperate pleas from tourist destinations across the galaxy. He flipped to the most recent edition, stamped with yesterday's date. Critical warning: do not inform human tourists that certain activities are impossible, have never been attempted, or violate known laws of physics. This information appears to act as a direct challenge to human behavior patterns, resulting in immediate attempts to prove otherwise. Kelthon's assistant, a small floating creature named Pip, drifted over to his desk. Pip's natural state was nervous energy, but lately he seemed to vibrate with pure anxiety. "Sir," Pip squeaked, "we have another incident report from Serenity Prime." Kelthon felt his stomach drop. Serenity Prime was supposed to be the safest resort world in the galaxy. It was designed specifically for relaxation, with gentle purple beaches, calm weather patterns, and absolutely no dangerous activities whatsoever. What happened this time? Kelthon asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Pip's small body flickered with distress. Two humans climbed Mount Despair. For a moment, Kelthon's brain simply refused to process this information. Mount Despair was not just a mountain, it was a naturally occurring impossibility. The gravitational fields around it shifted randomly, making any approach suicidal. The crystal formations on its surface released radiation that could kill most life forms in minutes. The local Alcarian people considered it sacred precisely because it represented the beauty of accepting that some things could not be done. "That's impossible," Kelthon said automatically, then immediately regretted it. He had learned that using the word impossible in connection with humans was like throwing fuel on a fire. "That's what everyone said," Pip replied miserably. "The Alcarians have been staring at the mountain for thousands of years, knowing it could never be climbed. They built their entire philosophy around accepting beautiful impossibilities. Then these two humans showed up and asked their tour guide if anyone had ever tried to climb it." Kelthon opened the incident report with growing dread. The details were even worse than he had imagined. The humans in question were named Tom Bradley and Emma Watson. They were on a standard vacation package to Serenity Prime, booked through the Bureau's Gentle Worlds for Peaceful Species program. According to their files, they had specifically requested a relaxing holiday with no adventure activities. Their Alcarian tour guide, a peaceful being called Whispertail, had been showing them the local sights when they spotted Mount Despair on the horizon. Whispertail had made the fatal mistake of explaining exactly why the mountain was impossible to climb, describing in detail the shifting gravity fields, the toxic crystals, and the long history of failed attempts by much more advanced species. Within 6 hours, the humans had stripped the bedsheets from their hotel room, fashioned them into some kind of flying device, and used their swimming gear as makeshift radiation protection. They had not only reached the summit but had spent an hour taking photographs of themselves with the impossible gravitational light show in the background. The rescue team that eventually retrieved them found the humans relaxed and cheerful. They had, according to the report, enjoyed the challenge, and were already planning their next adventure. The Alcarian government was in crisis. Their entire cultural identity was built around the acceptance of beautiful impossibilities. If humans could simply ignore impossibility whenever they felt like it, what did that mean for Alcarian philosophy? Emergency cultural committees were meeting around the clock to figure out how to adapt their worldview to a universe where humans existed. Kelthon set down the report and rubbed his temples with two of his hands while using the other two to pull up the Bureau's human statistics on his computer screen. In 3 years since humans had joined the galactic community, they had been banned from 14 worlds, restricted on 37 others, and had caused the complete revision of safety protocols on over 200 planets. They had accidentally started 4 new religions, solved 3 supposedly impossible mathematical problems, and had somehow made first contact with 17 previously undiscovered species, usually while trying to order food. The most disturbing part was that none of it seemed intentional. Humans did not appear to be malicious or even particularly reckless. They simply operated under the assumption that reality was more like a suggestion than a law. Kelton's computer chimed with an incoming message. Another incident report, this time from the academic world of Cognitus 7. He did not even open it. Instead, he pulled up the Bureau's master database and began typing a new universal warning label. "Attention all galactic tourism boards," he wrote. "Effective immediately, all human tourists must be treated as a Class 7 reality hazard. Standard impossibility does not apply. Previous failures by other species should not be mentioned in their presence. Supervision recommended at all times. Approach with extreme curiosity and unlimited patience." He paused, then added one final line. "Remember, they are not trying to break the universe. They just refuse to read the instruction manual." Tom Bradley stretched his arms as he stepped off the transport shuttle onto the purple sand beaches of Serenity Prime. The warm air smelled like vanilla and ocean salt, and 3 gentle suns cast everything in a soft golden light. Next to him, Emma Watson was already pulling out her camera to capture the perfect sunset that happened here twice a day. "This is exactly what we needed," Emma said, snapping photos of the crystal-clear water lapping at the shore. "No deadlines, no meetings, just pure relaxation for 2 whole weeks." Tom nodded, feeling the stress of his office job back on Earth melting away. They had specifically chosen Serenity Prime because the travel brochure promised it was the most peaceful planet in the galaxy. No extreme sports, no dangerous wildlife, no adventure tourism whatsoever. Just calm beaches, comfortable hotels, and gentle nature walks. Their hotel room was perfect, soft beds, a view of all 3 suns, and a bathroom with a shower that somehow knew exactly the right temperature. Tom was unpacking his clothes when Emma called from the balcony. "Tom, come look at this mountain. It's incredible." He joined her on the balcony and looked where she was pointing. In the distance, a massive peak rose from the purple landscape, but something was wrong with it. The mountain seemed to bend light around itself, creating strange colors that shifted and danced across its surface. Sometimes it looked solid, other times it appeared to be made of liquid starlight. "That's definitely not in the brochure," Tom said, squinting at the impossible sight. The next morning they met their tour guide in the hotel lobby. Whispertail was an Alcarian, standing about 6 feet tall with soft gray fur and 6 arms that moved in gentle, flowing motions. His large black eyes radiated kindness, and his voice had a musical quality that made everything sound like poetry. "Welcome, friend humans, to our beautiful world," Whispertail said, bowing slightly. "Today we will see the singing gardens, where the flowers make music in the breeze, and the crystal caves, where light dances like living beings." They climbed into Whispertail's hover vehicle, a comfortable pod that glided silently above the ground. As they traveled through the peaceful countryside, Whispertail pointed out various landmarks with obvious pride. The sleeping hills, where the grass changed colors based on the time of day. The whispering lake, where the water was so pure it reflected thoughts instead of faces. Then Emma spotted the strange mountain again, now much closer and even more bewildering than before. "What's that mountain called?" she asked, pointing through the transparent roof of the vehicle. Whispertail's fur rippled with what looked like sadness mixed with reverence. "Ah, that is Mount Despair, friend human. It is the most sacred place on our world." "Sacred?" Tom leaned forward, interested. "Why is it sacred?" "Because it teaches us the most important lesson of all," Whispertail explained, slowing the vehicle so they could get a better look. "It shows us that some things in the universe are meant to remain untouched. The mountain represents the beauty of accepting our limitations." Emma was already taking pictures through the roof. "But what makes it impossible to reach? I mean, it's just a mountain, right?" Whispertail's 6 arms moved in complex patterns as he spoke, a sign of deep emotion among his people. "Oh no, friend human. Mount Despair is far more than a mountain. The gravitational fields around it shift without warning. One moment you might feel normal weight, the next you could be crushed flat or flung into space. The crystal formations on its surface release radiation that would kill most beings in minutes. And the air itself becomes toxic at certain heights." Tom studied the mountain more carefully. Now that Whispertail mentioned it, he could see strange distortions in the air around the peak, like heat waves but more dramatic. "Has anyone ever tried to climb it?" "Many have dreamed of it," Whispertail said softly. "But dreaming and attempting are different things. Our people have studied the mountain for thousands of years. We have sent our best scientists, our most advanced equipment, our most careful plans. All have concluded the same thing: it cannot be done. And that is why we love it. In a universe where technology can solve most problems, Mount Despair reminds us that some mysteries should remain mysterious. Emma was zooming in with her camera, studying the mountain's face with growing interest. But look at that ledge system about halfway up. And those crystal formations could provide handholds if you approached from the right angle. Friend human, Whispertail said gently, even our most advanced climbing equipment would be destroyed by the gravitational shifts. The crystals would poison any climber long before they reached that height. It is not a matter of skill or courage, it is simply not possible. Tom was now studying the mountain too, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing routes and solutions. What about the radiation? How far up does it extend? The toxic zone begins approximately 1,000 meters from the base, Whispertail replied. But please, friend humans, do not let such thoughts trouble your vacation. Mount Despair is meant to be admired from a distance, not conquered. Come, let me show you the singing gardens instead. But as they drove away, both Tom and Emma kept looking back at the mountain. They spent the rest of the day touring the peaceful attractions of Serenity Prime, but their minds kept returning to Mount Despair. During dinner, they found themselves sketching possible routes on napkins. Back in their hotel room, Emma was researching gravitational fields on her tablet while Tom examined their scuba gear. The snorkeling equipment might work as radiation protection, Tom said thoughtfully. And hotel bedsheets are surprisingly strong when you braid them together, Emma added. They looked at each other for a moment, then Emma grinned. We're really going to try this, aren't we? It's probably completely insane, Tom replied. Probably, Emma agreed. But Whispertail said it was impossible. And I've never met an impossible mountain I didn't want to at least say hello to. They started planning immediately. Dr. Lisa Parker had dreamed of visiting Cognitus 7 since her graduate school days. The planet was legendary among academics throughout the galaxy, home to the cerebroids, a species whose intellectual achievements made human universities look like kindergarten playgrounds. Their research papers were works of art that took decades to complete, and their scientific conferences were attended by the greatest minds from hundreds of worlds. Lisa stepped off the transport ship and gasped at her first sight of the planet's capital city. Towering crystal spires reached toward the sky, each one housing vast libraries and research centers. The buildings themselves seemed to pulse with soft blue light, as if they were thinking. Floating platforms carried robed cerebroids between the spires, their large dome-shaped heads glowing faintly as they processed complex thoughts. The cerebroids were impressive beings to behold. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs and heads that took up almost a third of their body mass. Their skin had a translucent quality that allowed observers to see the intricate neural pathways lighting up beneath the surface as they thought. When they spoke, it was with careful precision, each word chosen after what seemed like minutes of consideration. Lisa checked into her guest quarters at the Academic Exchange Center, a beautiful building made entirely of what appeared to be living crystal. Her room was simple but elegant, with a desk that somehow knew when she needed writing materials and a bed that adjusted itself to her sleep patterns. The next morning was the opening ceremony of the annual Conference on Impossible Sciences. Lisa joined hundreds of beings from across the galaxy in the Great Crystal Amphitheater, a massive dome where sound carried perfectly to every seat. She found herself sitting between a gaseous being from the nebula clusters and a rock-like creature whose species communicated through vibrations. Professor Mindweaver, the conference's most respected speaker, took the stage. His head glowed brighter than the others, indicating the depth of his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of learning. Fellow scholars, he began, his words echoing beautifully through the crystal chamber, today I will present our latest findings on the quantum-shifted wildlife native to our world. For 300 years, we have studied these fascinating creatures who exist in a state of dimensional flux. Lisa leaned forward, fascinated. She had read about quantum animals in theoretical papers but had never imagined she might see them in person. The quantum deer of our world, Professor Mindweaver continued, represent one of the universe's greatest mysteries. They phase in and out of our reality, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Our most advanced computer models suggest that direct communication with these beings would require technology that does not yet exist, perhaps cannot exist. The professor's head pulsed with complex patterns of light as he accessed vast databases of research. We have attempted contact using quantum resonance frequencies, dimensional displacement fields, and telepathic enhancement devices. Each experiment, conducted over decades of careful preparation, has yielded the same result. The quantum deer remain beyond our reach. Lisa found herself raising her hand before she realized what she was doing. The entire amphitheater turned to look at her, hundreds of alien eyes focusing on the small human in the crowd. Yes? Professor Mindweaver asked, his voice patient but slightly confused. Interruptions during presentations were apparently not common among cerebroids. Have you tried just talking to them? Lisa asked, feeling suddenly foolish. You know, like normal conversation? A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the cerebroid audience. Professor Mindweaver's head pulsed with rapid flashes of light, indicating rapid processing of this unexpected suggestion. I beg your pardon, Dr. Parker, he said after a long pause, but I believe there may have been a translation error. Are you suggesting direct vocal communication with beings that exist in quantum flux? Well, yeah, Lisa replied, warming to the idea. Maybe some body language too. Sometimes animals respond better to actions than words. Have you tried offering them food? The amphitheater fell silent. Lisa could see the cerebroids' heads lighting up like Christmas trees as they processed this radically simple concept. Professor Mindweaver's brain patterns became so complex that other cerebroids began taking notes just on his thinking process. Food, he repeated slowly. Physical sustenance as a basis for interdimensional communication. It works great with regular animals back home, Lisa said cheerfully. Most creatures are curious about food, even if they're shy about everything else. The conference broke for lunch immediately after the presentation. Lisa wandered out to the quantum gardens behind the amphitheater, a beautiful space where reality seemed to shimmer and bend. According to the signs, this was where the quantum deer were most likely to appear, though they warned visitors that sightings were extremely rare. Lisa sat on a bench and pulled out her lunch, a simple sandwich from Earth food that the conference organizers had provided. As she ate, she noticed the air around her beginning to sparkle with tiny points of light. Hello there, she said quietly to the empty air. Don't mind me just having lunch. The sparkles grew brighter, and suddenly a deer-like creature shimmered into existence about 20 feet away. It was beautiful and strange, its body seeming to be made of liquid starlight. As Lisa watched, 2 more appeared, then 3 more. She held out a piece of her sandwich. Want to try some? It's peanut butter and jelly. Pretty basic, but it's comfort food where I come from. The lead deer approached cautiously, its form flickering between dimensions. It sniffed the offered food, then delicately took it with what might have been a mouth. The deer made a sound like wind chimes, and suddenly all 6 deer were gathered around Lisa, their forms stabilizing as they focused on the shared meal. Within minutes, she was playing a version of fetch with a stick while the quantum deer made sounds that definitely resembled laughter. They seemed to enjoy the simple interaction, their complex dimensional nature not preventing them from appreciating basic friendship. That was how Professor Mindweaver found her an hour later, surrounded by 6 quantum deer who had apparently decided that Lisa was the most interesting thing they had encountered in centuries. The professor's head was flashing so rapidly with new thoughts that he had to sit down on a nearby bench. Dr. Parker, he said faintly, I believe we may need to revise our research methods. Captain Jack Murphy had been warned that the Nexus System diplomatic mission was where careers went to die. The briefing files made it clear that every ambassador, mediator, and peacekeeping expert who had attempted to resolve the conflict between the Thoraxians and the Vortai had returned home defeated and confused. Jack stood in the observation deck of the neutral space station, looking out at the 2 fleets that had been facing each other across the asteroid field for the past 6 months. The Thoraxian ships moved in perfect formation, every vessel acting as part of a single massive organism. The Vortai ships, in contrast, flew in chaotic patterns that seemed to change every few minutes as individual captains made their own decisions. The conflict had been going on for over 2,000 years, and nobody really remembered how it started anymore. The problem was not territory or resources. Both species had plenty of space and everything they needed. The problem was that they literally could not understand each other's basic nature. The Thoraxians were a hive mind species. Millions of individual bodies shared a single consciousness, thinking and acting as one unified being. They made decisions through instant mental consensus and moved with perfect coordination. To them, individual thought was not just foreign, it was terrifying and chaotic. The Vortai were the exact opposite. They prized individual thinking above everything else. Each member of their species made their own choices, often deliberately disagreeing with their neighbors just to prove their independence. To them, the idea of shared consciousness was horrifying, a loss of everything that made life worth living. Jack had read through decades of failed peace talks. Previous diplomats had tried everything: trade agreements, territory divisions, cultural exchanges, even arranged marriages between the species. Nothing worked because the two groups could not even agree on what the problem was, let alone how to solve it. The current round of talks was happening in Conference Room 7, a sterile white space with a circular table designed to give no one species an advantage. Jack took his seat between Ambassador Hivemind 773, who spoke through 12 identical Thoraxian bodies, and Lone Thinker Prime, the Vortai representative who had been chosen specifically because he disagreed with everyone else in his government. The solution is obvious, all 12 Thoraxian bodies said in perfect unison. Individual thinking leads to chaos and suffering. The Vortai must join our collective consciousness for the good of both species. Lone Thinker Prime immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. In fact, I disagree with that statement so completely that I am going to disagree with myself for even listening to it. He paused, then added, actually, I think I was wrong to disagree so quickly. Maybe I should consider it. No, wait, that's a terrible idea too. Jack watched this exchange with growing frustration. The Vortai representative was so committed to independent thought that he argued with his own opinions. The Thoraxians were so unified that they could not even imagine why anyone would want to think differently. After 6 hours of circular arguments, they broke for dinner. The meal was held in the station's main dining hall, a large room with tables designed to accommodate dozens of different alien species. Jack found himself seated at a long table with the 12 Thoraxian bodies arranged on one side and the Vortai representative on the other. The food was standard diplomatic fare, bland, safe, and designed not to offend anyone's dietary restrictions. Jack was picking at something that might have been space chicken when disaster struck. One of the Thoraxian bodies reached for a water glass at exactly the same moment as all the others, creating a perfectly synchronized movement. Unfortunately, the coordination was so precise that when one body's elbow hit the edge of the table, all 12 bodies made the same motion, sending 12 glasses of water flying across the table. The water hit Lone Thinker Prime directly in the face. Without thinking, Jack grabbed the nearest piece of food, a dinner roll, and threw it at the Thoraxian who had started the water disaster. Food fight, he yelled, mostly because it seemed like the thing to do. What happened next would be analyzed by diplomatic historians for generations. The 12 Thoraxian bodies instantly responded as one, grabbing handfuls of food and launching coordinated strikes at the human and the Vortai. Their movements were perfectly synchronized. When one threw mashed potatoes, all 12 threw mashed potatoes in exactly the same way. Lone Thinker Prime, true to his nature, refused to coordinate with anyone. Instead of ducking or running, he began throwing food back, but with completely individual style. He threw a piece of bread overhand, some fruit underhand, and launched a bowl of soup with a spinning motion that no one else in the room had ever seen. Other diners began to join in. The crystalline observers threw food that sparkled in the air. The plant-based rootkin hurled salad with surprising accuracy. Soon the entire dining hall was chaos. But something strange began to happen in the chaos. The Thoraxians, watching the Vortai's unpredictable throwing styles, started to appreciate the creative beauty of individual choice. Each throw was unique, surprising, and somehow more interesting than their own perfect coordination. Meanwhile, Lone Thinker Prime found himself admiring the way the Thoraxians worked together. Their coordinated food volleys created patterns in the air that were almost artistic. For the first time in his life, he began to understand that unity did not have to mean the death of creativity. Jack, covered in various alien foods, watched as the two groups slowly stopped throwing things at each other and started throwing them together, creating elaborate food sculptures that combined Thoraxian coordination with Vortai individual flair. By the end of the evening, Thoraxian drones were teaching Vortai children group games while individual Vortai were helping Thoraxian units discover personal hobbies like painting and music. The peace treaty was signed on a napkin 3 days later, written in what appeared to be soup stains and signed with vegetables. The new diplomatic protocol filed by the Galactic Peace Corps was simple. Food fights are now considered a legitimate negotiation strategy when dealing with impossible cultural conflicts. The Grand Assembly Hall of New Harmony Station had never seen anything like it. Representatives from 847 different species filled the massive amphitheater, creating a sea of colors, shapes, and sizes that would have been beautiful if not for the atmosphere of barely controlled panic that hung over the gathering. Ambassador Kelthon stood at the central podium, looking out at the crowd with all 4 of his eyes. In his 37 years of diplomatic service, he had organized conferences about trade disputes, territorial boundaries, and cultural misunderstandings. But this was the first time in galactic history that an entire convention had been called to discuss a single species. Humans had been part of the galactic community for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. In that time, they had managed to cause more administrative headaches than the previous century of interstellar relations combined. Fellow beings, Kelthon began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's advanced translation systems, we are here today because of an unprecedented situation. The human species has required more safety protocols, warning labels, and emergency procedures than every other known intelligent species combined. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Tentacles waved, crystalline bodies chimed in harmony, and several gaseous beings shifted colors to indicate their frustration. The representative from Serenity Prime stood up first. Whispertail, the Alcarian tour guide who had survived the Mount Despair incident, spoke in his musical voice. Honored delegates, my people have spent thousands of years building our culture around the acceptance of beautiful impossibilities. Then 2 humans climbed our sacred mountain using hotel bedsheets and swimming gear. Our entire philosophical system is now under review by emergency committees. Concerned murmurs filled the hall. The idea of an entire culture having to revise its basic beliefs because of tourists was deeply troubling to everyone present. Professor Mindweaver from Cognitus 7 rose next, his large head pulsing with agitated light patterns. My colleagues, we cerebroids pride ourselves on careful, methodical research spanning centuries. We had spent 300 years proving that communication with quantum-shifted wildlife was theoretically impossible. A human xenobiologist disproved our work during a lunch break using a sandwich and interpretive dance. The mathematical collective's representative, a geometric being made of shifting equations, projected its thoughts directly into the translation system. We created the paradox of infinite recursion specifically because it had no solution. It was meant to be a beautiful example of the limits of logic. A human graduate student solved it in 47 minutes because, quote, nobody told him it was supposed to be impossible. One by one the stories poured out. The peaceful monks of Serenity Beta reported that a human tourist had accidentally founded 3 new religious movements while trying to order lunch, simply by asking why, too many questions in a row. The Deep Space Observatory Consortium explained how human volunteers had turned a black hole research mission into something they called extreme gravitational surfing, somehow managing to gather more scientific data in one afternoon than the previous decade of careful study. The energy beings from the Spiral Nebula flickered with distress as their representative spoke. Humans discovered our hidden dimension by accident while trying to fix a broken coffee machine. They invited us to dinner and somehow convinced our eldest council members to try something called pizza. We have now established formal diplomatic relations based entirely on shared meals. Kelthon listened to each report, taking careful notes. The pattern was always the same: humans encountered something that was supposed to be impossible, ignored the impossibility completely, and then accomplished the task while trying to do something else entirely. The representative from the war-torn Nexus system, a mechanical being with multiple arms, whirred to life. Captain Murphy resolved our 2,000-year conflict with a food fight. A food fight. Our species could not understand each other's basic nature for millennia. Then this human started throwing dinner rolls, and suddenly we realized that cooperation and individuality could coexist. The peace treaty was signed on a napkin. The crowd grew quieter as more species shared their experiences. What emerged was not a picture of malicious destruction, but of a species that simply refused to accept that anything was permanently impossible. The humans do not seem to break our rules on purpose, observed the crystalline delegate from Altair Prime, her body chiming softly. They break them because they do not understand that rules are supposed to be permanent. They treat every impossible as if it were just another word for nobody has tried the right approach yet. The ethereal collective's representative, a shimmering cloud of organized gas, pulsed with sudden understanding. Perhaps the issue is not with the humans. Perhaps the issue is with our concept of impossibility itself. This statement caused an uproar in the assembly. Delegates began talking at once in dozens of languages, creating a cacophony of sound that the translation system struggled to process. Kelthon raised all 4 arms for silence. When the hall finally quieted, he spoke carefully. Fellow beings, I believe we have been approaching this problem incorrectly. We have been trying to create warnings to protect the universe from humans. But what if we should be creating opportunities to learn from them? The silence that followed was profound. Every human incident has resulted in new discoveries, solved ancient problems, or created unexpected connections between species, Kelthon continued. Perhaps instead of warning labels, we need collaboration protocols. The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The new Galactic Human Integration Protocol established research partnerships between human specialists and various alien institutions. The impossible would now be treated as the merely difficult, and humans would be assigned as reality consultants to any project that had been stuck for more than a decade. The final warning label they created was simple: attention, humans present. Prepare for rapid paradigm shifts. Traditional limitations may not apply. Approach with curiosity and maintain flexible worldviews. As the delegates filed out of the assembly hall, many of them were already planning their next impossible projects. After all, if someone was going to revolutionize everything they thought they knew about the universe, it might as well be intentional. The age of human-guided impossibility had officially begun.